Hi there, Scott Wilder here from the Udacity marketing team, and this is part of the webinar series Designing User Experiences for Enterprise Companies. Today I'm with Michael Dedrick, who is the instructor of the Udacity UX Designer Nanodegree. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
So Michael, I want to start off the discussion by telling us a little bit about who you are, your journey, and how did you get into the role you are in today?
Great. Thank you for having me, Scott. Really appreciate it. How I got into UX design, it actually started off with my older brother. He started a company to pay his way through college, and he's more of a back-end developer. And he didn't really know a lot of design, and at the time I didn't know a lot about design either, but I was very curious about it and interested in it. And he said, hey, would you be able to help me design some of these websites that I've been working on? And then, I helped him out with a variety of clients. He went off to school, and I actually continued working with these clients on the side. And at the time, I was really interested in animation. So I went to animation school, where I learned animation, also design, motion graphics, and film. And when I was finished that, I worked in the animation industry for a bit. I worked in film, and I worked in TV, and even video games. Yeah. And after that, decided that I wanted to take UX design sort of full-time and take it from the part-time job to sort of the full-time job. And at that point, I started working at a variety of startups, and they really gave me a lot of opportunity there to wear a variety of hats, try a lot of things, even in some cases, building product from the ground up. So it was a really unique experience. And I attribute that to getting a lot of my knowledge very early on. And it gave me a lot of opportunity to build my portfolio and eventually getting opportunities to work at companies such as partnership with Apple and IBM and now Google as well. And I've also worked in the capacity of being a UX instructor and also designing UX curriculum. So I designed curriculum for a variety of boot camps and also mentored as well, and even had the opportunity to create a UX program for a nonprofit to help inner city youth as well. So that's a little bit about me.
You mentioned design earlier, and so one of the things that I've encountered is confusion about UI and UX. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So first, we can define the two terms. So UX stands for user experience design, and UI stands for user interface design. And the best way that I like to describe them both, instead of looking at them sort of in parallel, I like to look at user experience design as kind of like the umbrella, the overarching umbrella that encompasses a variety of disciplines, and UI design being one of them. But within that, there are things like, UX writing, user research, and user interface design is a part of that as well. And so user interface design, when you think of that, if you think of like websites and you think about where certain things go in a website, the structure, the architecture, the colors, the typography, how it feels, that is more user interface. And user experience design is sort of like the all-encompassing experience. So how does the user navigate their way through that experience, through those interfaces? What's their experience with the architecture that you've created overall? So that's how I like to look at the relationship between those two things.
So would you say that UX encompasses many different disciplines, and if so, what would those be?
Absolutely. So UX has a variety of disciplines. One of them would be obviously user experience design itself. Even within design itself, there's visual design, there's graphic design, there's information architecture, and even UX writing is a part of that. Research is a part of that. Project management is a part of that. Strategy, as well as engineering as well.
And so, and so how do I there's all these different disciplines. How does one prepare for a career or profession in terms of the UX world?
Yeah, it's really challenging. I think the best way for one to prepare, aside from getting taking this course,
Yep.
the UX.
I want you to know I
Nanodegree.
signed up for the course.
Did you? Awesome. So you're well on your way. That's great. Aside from that, reaching out to some people that they admire. So some designers I know for myself. There's designers that I admire myself on social media, and taking them out for a coffee, asking them some questions, finding out what a day in the life is for them as designers, and also practicing, because I find that this job is very hands-on, and the more you do it, it accumulates, and you get better and better.
So a little bit like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely like that.
Got it. So I want to talk more about the course in a few minutes, but in terms of like learning, you mentioned, meeting people in the field. Are there any kind of websites, blogs, just to kind of that people should follow to learn about what's going on in the UX world?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely tons. A few that a lot of designers go to. Dribble is one, for example, where you can get a lot of design as far as UI experience and inspiration goes. There are general sites like Twitter as well, where for a lot of designers are there, and they're tweeting about a variety of things. LinkedIn as well. There are a lot of specific blogs that you can go to as well. Behance is another one for design inspiration. And there's tons that I can name.
So you're in this role. You've worked for small companies and large companies. What's the difference between working in these two different environments?
Yeah, there are actually a lot that is quite similar, but there are very distinct differences. So if you are a designer at a smaller company or a startup, you're expected to, in a lot of ways, to kind of do the full gamut of work. So because in many cases they have less resources, so they kind of expect you to do all those different roles that I mentioned before.
Yep.
They kind of expect you to do all of those roles. So everything from the research to the writing to the design, architecture, even sometimes even front-end development. So you're expected sometimes to know some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as well. And you're working sometimes directly with the CEO, directly with engineers to create that vision. In a larger company, more resources available to you. I find that the role of the UX designer is actually kind of divided quite a bit. So you may be a UX designer, but you're working with a visual designer, and you're working with maybe a graphic designer, and you're working with a writer and researcher and engineer. So that those roles are very sort of separated, and you're collaborating a lot more as opposed to working independently. So your job is very contingent on being able to collaborate and brainstorm and work together as a whole to come up with elegant solutions for users.
For each of those different areas you talked about, can you just give me like a sentence or two about kind of describing what that person's going to do and what's required to be in that space?
Sure. So like, for example, a UX writer is responsible for creating, elegant copy, making sure that the voice of the product is heard and represents the product, is cohesive with the product. UX researchers can run throughout the process, but usually it happens in the beginning of the process is where you'll find a lot of that work is done, where they're doing initial sort of foundational research on the users, finding out, what their problems are, empathizing with them, and finding out where those pain points are so that we can then take those and then come up with solutions for them. UI designer would do more information architecture, would work on things, and that could be, in conjunction with a visual designer as well. So, coming up with things like style guides and, sort of like the look and feel of the whole site, looking at things like typography and, the visual aesthetic of the overall website or, tablet or mobile, whatever the product may be. And project manager would be somebody that's like, looking over the whole project, making sure that people are meeting and deadlines are being made. Strategy would may work in collaboration with project management, or sometimes they are the project management. Like sometimes it's a kind of a role that's combined as well. And engineering is usually at the end of the process, so a designer would hand off their work to an engineer in order to be developed, to put code behind it so users can interact with it.
Mm-hmm. So that was really helpful in talking about the different disciplines within UX. Now,
Yes.
you mentioned platforms. So you mentioned tablets, mobile, obviously there's desktop.
Yeah.
How is UX different across all the different platforms?
They are different in the sense that they all have their own best practices.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that across all these different experiences, there are these rules, generally speaking, like keeping an interface very simple, making sure that you're optimizing it for the user, making sure that you're providing opportunities for users to learn things and to discover things, and making sure that the user overall gets to their goal ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And also that you're making the interface delightful, and that there's those little moments where they can say, oh, that's really nice. I didn't really expect that.
Yep.
So you find that regardless of what platform you're on, you'll find that those things are very consistent across them all.
So, okay, so tell me a little bit about what you love most about your profession. What is it that gets you to work every morning?
What I love most about my profession is solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
I would say would be the best part. I've had the opportunity to work in UX in a variety of capacities, and I find that consistently it's always the problems that I love most. Just being able to take something that maybe no one has ever solved or no one has ever thought of, and there's also a variety of ways to solve a problem as well. And then thinking, how could I solve this in a way that's going to improve the quality of life for users?
Mm-hmm.
And then going through that process and then actually coming to the point where, you see a user with using an interface that you've designed, and you've solved their problem. You've actually made their life a lot easier. You've taken complexity out of their life, and that you were involved in that process. I think is really rewarding and fulfilling.
So that was about the beginning of the day. And now I'm curious about at the end of the day, when you go home, how do you determine whether or not you've been successful at work that day? And then the second part of this is everybody's got to answer to somebody, right? So how does your manager or whomever, a client, determine, how do they judge success in terms of your work?
Yeah, as far as the user is concerned, I think determining whether or not we're successful is understanding their goals, understanding their needs. And then if they can achieve those goals and those needs at the end of the day, we know we have been successful.
Mm-hmm.
Does it fulfill their need? Does it get them to their goal? Do they find delight in what we've designed? Does it make their life easier at the end of the day? Do they want to come back to the application after they've used it once or twice? These are all really good indicators that they really enjoy the application and we've met our goal overall. And in terms of reporting to somebody, and they're going to ask, how do we know? Because it may not just be enough to say, oh yeah, users are coming back.
Yep.
We really want specific numbers and and metrics. So understanding those goals up front, what we want to track, we can use a variety of software
Mm-hmm.
in order to sort of track those metrics and making sure that those things are achieved. So, for example, on a website, if it's something like tracking the number of users that are using a certain feature on
Mm-hmm.
a website, we could install analytics on the website, and then we could track those specific metrics over time, over a week or a month or a year, and make sure that those numbers are going up.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's like a particular funnel or a particular place that we want a user to go into a website, let's just say it's like a shopping cart application, and we want to make sure that they're clicking on that shopping cart button, we can track that as well.
Yeah.
To make sure that they're clicking that button and purchasing goods on a website, usually through software as well. Or if it's something like maybe like a redesign of a website,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you want to set up like an A/B test to test the performance of the new site versus the old site, by comparison. So a lot of this is driven through website software and analytics
Mm-hmm.
to track performance over time. So we can give specific numbers and metrics to show that we're bringing the users value and that what we've designed is actually working, performing well.
So you mentioned testing. That's a hot topic in my world.
Yeah.
So, because I'm in marketing, whether it's a large company or a small company, I mean, how much testing is really going on out there in terms of what companies are doing?
I would say a lot of testing
Mhm.
has to be going on. I think it's important to understand how these products are performing. Otherwise, we're just designing things and we're not really understanding whether users are liking them or not, or whether they're useful.
Mhm.
So I think that's also a part of what really good UX is really understanding not only what the user's needs are, but whether we're meeting those needs and whether we're achieving that. So I would assume that all the companies are testing and making sure that they're meeting those needs.
So let's talk a little bit about UX Designer Nanodegree.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about the program, what it encompasses, and what people are going to learn during it, and probably how it's going to help them with their career.
So one of the things I really like about the Nanodegree program is that you don't necessarily need prior experience in order to take the course. And it takes you all the way through the UX pipeline, all the way from the research component and all the way through to the ending where you're doing like handing off to the engineer and also design performance, like we mentioned before. So analyzing what you've done and tracking the performance. And even going into the portfolio, which gets you ready for your job as well. And it's also at your own pace, and you also get mentorship along the way as well. So it's geared towards a variety of people, different walks of life, and it really sets you up for success.
Yeah. So you mentioned portfolios, and I think that's really key here. Can you talk a little bit about what that entails, and basically what's the finished product that somebody has after they go through the program?
So the student will come out with a portfolio that represents everything they've done in the course, and it will be a deep dive into a case study essentially that goes from everything from research all the way to evaluating their design. And it's broken down into pieces, and it represents the variety of parts of the process and how they've evaluated the user's needs and how they've solved the problem overall.
So that sounds really interesting in terms of the course itself. Now, people go through the course, and one of the reasons they're doing it is because they want to advance their careers.
Yeah.
So what sort of opportunities open up for an individual when they go through the Nanodegree program?
Yeah, there's tons of opportunities that can open up. You can work in UX writing, you could do research, you can do project management, you can do information architecture, visual design, graphic design, project management, strategy. There's so many opportunities available.
So how is the job market today for somebody who goes through who's a UX designer?
Oh, it's huge, and it just keeps booming. There's so much opportunity. There's so much, every company I think is working on product. Would essentially need a UX designer in order to realize a product and to strategize and to think through what users' needs are. So I think it's essential. It's vital. So there's definitely going to be an increasing number of opportunities in the coming years.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you worked at small companies, you've worked at larger companies.
Yeah.
What are some of the pros and cons of somebody working, at these different companies? And maybe one way to think about it is a lot of people are career changers, or a lot of people it's the next move in their career.
Right.
So in that frame of mind, what are the pros and cons of starting at a smaller company or going to a larger company?
I think, well, for myself, I actually attribute to smaller companies a lot of sort of learning and kind of just getting my chops, getting started. I was able to learn a lot because they gave me a lot of autonomy at these smaller companies. They just basically said, go and design whatever you want. Whereas a larger company, I think, is a little more structured. So I think it seems a lot more of a better opportunity for someone who has a lot of experience because they can sort of hone in on a particular part of UX that they really like. But in the beginning, when you're just learning, it's really nice to kind of have sort of a broad sort of skill set, so you can kind of go in there and do a little bit of UX writing, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of visual design, and kind of find out where you like and where your passions really lie. And then once you get a feel for that, then working for a larger company, I feel, is more advantageous to you, so you can go very deep in that particular discipline.
So in your current role, what is your day-to-day like? And then I'm also curious about, like, what teams do you interact with in the company besides marketing?
Yeah, it's there's no 2 days that are really alike. I find that the days could be very different. So one day could be just, sort of very heads down work and doing like, prototyping and mock-ups. And then the next day could be, working with PMs and doing like strategy, doing like whiteboarding sessions and trying to figure out some ideas. Or working with researchers. Maybe we are doing some user testing for a particular product that doesn't exist yet. So, how do you, do user testing on a product that doesn't exist? So you might need a UX designer to visualize what this product is before it exists. So doing mock-ups and then creating interactive prototypes so that these can be tested. And this is great because it saves engineering countless hours of engineering time. So they don't have to develop something in order to find out whether or not it works. So, I could be doing that on a particular day or several days at a time. Or sometimes, working with the writer, to, take all their UX copy that they have and putting it into interfaces. And also working with engineers to align a product or make sure that I have handoff correct. So putting together things like specs and style guides and components in order for that to be ready for handoff as well. Or I could just be in meetings all day, which happens more often than I care to admit. But there's a variety of things. And sometimes it's a combination of those things. So really that there's not really one particular day that's like any other, which keeps it very exciting because you don't know what you're going to get from day to day.
So do you have any tips for collaborating with engineering or with other groups in the company?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to, sometimes I feel there's, because engineering tends to come sort of like at the end of the process where, designers are working on things and then they do like this handoff process and hand off everything they've been working on, and then engineering will take it, develop it, and then put it out there to the world. So there's this desire to wait to engage with them. But I think a better practice is to engage with them right from the beginning, let them know what you're thinking, even if it's like a whiteboard sketch or if it's like, something you've been sketching on a napkin, just like socialize it with them, let them know what you're working on so that they can start thinking about, how are they going to engineer the solution, the back end part of it. Also, just keeping the dialogue going overall and, keeping all of the different counterparts that you're working with sort of in a sort of a dialogue loop so that they all have an idea of what every other department is doing as well. And also asking really good questions and making sure that you're speaking in sort of like common language. Because designers, there's like sort of like designer speak in a way, and getting sort of technical with designer
What's
sort of
designer
words.
speak?
Designer speak like, using like designer, I guess, sort of terminology. I guess it's easier to maybe put that in like engineering terms. Like engineers would, say things like, SQL and, HTML and all these, different sort of technical terms that someone's not a developer may not really understand. So there's a way, I guess, to speak a common language so that everyone who's at the table, regardless of what function they're in, has an understanding of what's happening and, and has an idea of what the goals that need to be achieved are.
What about interacting with other groups in the company? What's the secret to, like, working with marketing or working with product or working with content?
I think it's funny is that a lot of those, I guess, tricks to working with them are very similar in the sense that you really want to engage them early, keep them in the loop, ask a lot of questions, make sure that they feel that they have a role in what you're working on as well. And and just having a good sort of dialogue and communication overall. I tend to do things like design sprints a lot of times, which is just a way when you have a lot of different stakeholders who have a lot of different opinions, which is very common. Design sprints are a way to bring everybody together in one place, and then have them do could be 1 or 2 days or sometimes a week to sort of brainstorm. It's like a large brainstorm to allow them to all come to sort of like a mutual idea. So that's something that I think is really great as well. So definitely keeping them engaged, and sort of using that common language again, I think is very important. And yeah, just like providing every opportunity to hear their ideas as well.
I love that term, design sprints. Can you say more about so here I am, I've just finished the course. I want to create a design sprint in my new company. What does that entail?
Yeah, well, design sprints are actually a lot of work to set up. And, what you'd definitely want to do is, well, it starts off with just wanting to align, a bunch of different stakeholders, really. And, you definitely want to do something like get somebody to, from each party, from each department. Mm-hmm. So you may want to have writing involved. You may want to have design involved.
One person from each group, or
at least one person from each group, or sometimes in some cases more. And you definitely want to get them all in the same room. And then you're doing things like you definitely want to have some sort of problem that you want to solve, you want to tackle, and then booking rooms. It usually involves a lot of sticky notes and doing rough drawings and what they call lightning talks. So keeping in mind that everybody who's in the room may not have an idea of what everybody else does or what the problem space is. So these lightning talks are to inform everybody and get everybody on the same page. So it's a really quick, sometimes 5-minute sort of talk that maybe each party will do to kind of get everybody on the same page and up to speed. And it's a lot of work to sort of put that all together. And usually it's maybe a couple days, or sometimes it's spread out in a week. And the outcome is sort of in an idea or something that's very rough that you can then take forward and then turn into maybe a new feature or maybe a new product. A lot of different things come out of a design sprint, which is great. It's very organic and dynamic in that sense.
Nice. So earlier I mentioned that getting the right job or enhancing your career, advancing your career is really important.
Yeah.
So when you talk to candidates who are interested in working for you or working at the company, what sort of questions do you ask, or what are you looking for in these candidates?
Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely looking for somebody who's willing to learn. Because the thing with our job, there's never a point where you just kind of get to the top of a mountain and you're just I know everything about UX. It's definitely a learning process, and regardless of what stage of your career you're at, there's always more to learn. So if someone comes in with that sort of spirit to want to continue to learn, that's something I definitely look for. Someone who's able to be sort of calm under pressure, and someone who's also be able to thrive in ambiguity. A lot of times things aren't very clear. They don't have really clear ideas of sort of what's going to be next or what we need to do. So sometimes the designer needs to be able to go into a problem space and just figure something out. So that's super important. Also someone who's willing to collaborate, and someone that works really well with people, and that likes working with a lot of people, and is comfortable working on large or small projects, and those are a lot of the things that I definitely look at. And also someone who obviously has good work.
Yep.
It helps as well.
Is that the portfolio aspect?
The portfolio.
Interesting. So when you look at your career, let's say the past few years, what's really helped you progress? What's helped you move forward in your career? And in your next adventure, whether it's internally where you are or externally, what do you think is going to help you move to the next level?
Yeah, I think for me, it's also seeking mentorship from a variety of people. I'm lucky to work in an environment that allows me to have a lot of mentorship in those in different areas, and constantly learning, like having a learner's mentality, and constantly challenging myself, not taking work that I find is just very easy, like kind of pushing it a little bit to a point maybe that's a bit uncomfortable.
Yep.
Like, I'm not sure what I'm doing right now, but I kind of want to figure it out. And I feel if I keep doing that, that will allow me to get to the next level of my career. And it's always sort of thriving in that ambiguity and figuring things out. A lot of the job of a UX designer is we come into the space not really having the answers, for anything, but then doing our research and figuring it out along the way. So that's something that I want to continue doing to continue growing in my career.
It really resonates with me. I think one of the things that appeals to me about UX design, at least for me personally, is that you're in a learning mode. Have you ever heard being in the flow or being in the zone, right? So you're a little bit like, it's new. Yeah. And so since it's new, it's a little uncomfortable. Yeah. But then if you kind of ace it, you get into the zone and you get that rush.
Exactly.
So if you look into your crystal ball in terms of the UX profession, what do you see happening in the next few years?
Yeah, it's the space is getting even more interesting. I think when a lot of people think about UX, they think about like platforms that exist right now, like mobile or desktop or tablet. But what's exciting is that is being expanded beyond those ideas, and now we're seeing UX in a variety of places. We have. You're seeing it show up in things like vehicles. You're seeing it show up in on your wall, in your coffee cup, everywhere, right? You can virtually design your experience for virtually anything, and things like voice UX is very exciting as well. Thinking about those deviceless devices essentially, or AI and machine learning are obviously very exciting areas as well. Quantified self, there's a variety of areas that are super interesting that I think designers should pay attention to and look to in the future.
You mentioned quantified self. I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
It's funny is that when put that way, a lot of people would say, "Hey, I don't really know what that is," but I'm sure you have exposure to it if you've heard of things like a Fitbit watch, for example, or any device that allows you to sort of measure or analyze yourself. They'd call that sort of in the realm of quantified self.
What a great term! In addition to this Nanodegree UX designer, is there anything else an individual can do to prepare for a career as a UX designer?
Yes, absolutely. I would say, practice is one. Continue to hone the skills. It's one of those things that's very hands-on, so continuing to practice is always a good thing. And, seeking mentorship. Obviously, taking this course, the Nanodegree, I think is super great opportunity to learn and to improve your skill set or to learn a new skill set, and go to blogs, read a lot on UX design, learn from the people who have already been doing it, and ask a lot of questions, and keep the passion going for it, and
So the last question I always like to ask is there anything that you thought I was going to ask that I didn't ask or that I should have asked?
Good question. Let's see. I think you asked some really good questions. So, yeah.
This has been Scott Wilder from the Udacity marketing team, and today I've been with Michael Dedrick, who is the instructor of the UX Designer Nanodegree program. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us today.